Hey everyone! Welcome back to the third devlog for Spacefleet Heat Death, the realistic space RPG I've been working on. This time, we're talking railguns, radiators, and a ton of under-the-hood work that's getting us closer to a playable demo. Stay tuned because I've also got an important update regarding that. Quick reminder, Spacefleet will always be a game first and simulation second. My goal is to have a relatively simple learning curve with a decently high skill ceiling so that even if you're not a rocket scientist, you can still feel like a fleet commander. Of course, I will add as many realistic features as I can, provided that they don't get in the way of gameplay. First, let's look at the strategic scene. Oh, wait a minute. Something's missing. There we go. Yeah, so this is Jupiter for scale, in case you needed to see just how big or small things really are here. Anyway, let's start with what's probably the most obvious change. After adding a bunch of stations around Earth Luna, things were getting a bit too overcrowded, so I made the track images smaller. They also show more information based on your zoom level, just to make things tidier. I've also polished the navigation panel. You'll now see the ships limiting the delta V and acceleration of the fleet. I also added a collision warning in case the path you're taking leads to your fleet accidentally committing mass murder. Anyway, here's the various stations from the major factions. You'll find most of them over their territory in geostationary orbit. A couple stations of note are Itokawa and Tianmen. The former is owned by Hakuge Heavy Industries and sits at the L5 point, and the latter was a gateway station that China built on L1 to support travel between Earth and Luna. But after the Chinese Civil War that divided the country into three pieces, the managers of Tianmen Station decided to become independent, and have been profiting heavily ever since. Now here's the very tentative UI for stations. On the left, you'll see any fleets you have in its vicinity. On the right is the port, and any free docking base on the station. Here we have Job. We can click these toggles on the right to request these services from the station, which will automatically fill up our tanks and build our coffers. While that loads up, you'll notice the station's fuel supply is also going down along with our money. Stations will have different sizes for their fuel, and better ports have faster fuel transfer times. Here's the engagement prompt for whenever your fleet gets near a hostile. You'll see the ships from both sides, with options for ordering the fleet to surrender, auto-resolve, or fight. Now, onto the tactical scene. If you've seen the new teaser, you may have noticed that the radiators glow now, though I only noticed after editing that the Shin radiators were actually too yellow for their temperature. They also retract now. My plan is that ships will have very high heat signatures if the radiators are deployed, so you're going to want to retract them during combat. However, you're going to be relying on heat sinks, which will limit how long your ship can fight, unless you want to risk deploying your radiators, which will make you easier to target. Down here, we have the heat system. I'm pretty proud of this one. It took a bit of tinkering to find a good UI for something like this. Let's use Dauntless here for an example. Starting here at the top, which shows the heat sources in the ship and how much heat they produce relative to each other. When the ship is stationary and the laser is shooting, it's the only thing producing heat. But when I order the ship to move, the drive goes out of low power mode and generates a lot of heat. And so this will allow you to know which ones to turn off when you are producing more heat than you are dissipating. Net heat is where you'll find the heat you're currently producing, and how much of that you're radiating away. If I retract my radiators, heat now overflows to the heat sinks. They will store the heat until the radiators are deployed again, or until the heat sinks reach capacity and the entire ship, including your crew module, overheats. This damages the modules over time until the ship is nothing but a glowing husk. For those who are curious, heat management is very important in space. Things like living quarters, drives, and weapons produce heat. The problem is there's not a lot of ways to dissipate that heat. You can't just open a window and let the cool air in. The longer your ship is in use, the more heat will build up inside until things start melting away. Fortunately, one of the ways to dissipate this heat is by using radiators. These guys take heat away from your ship and shoot them off into space. But there's two problems with this. These guys make your ships big targets, and if they are destroyed, heat is once again going to build up in your ship. This makes them prime targets for your enemies. Okay, technically you need different radiators since a module like your drive produces a lot more heat than something like your crew module. If you connect your low temperature modules to the high temperature ones, their temperatures are going to balance out, which will leave your crew boiling alive. This is why you're going to require low temperature radiators for your low heat modules. So yeah, heat management is going to be a big deal in heat death. But you only need to worry about the high temperature modules such as lasers and drives. Low temperature modules like the crew module and sensors won't need to be managed since that would be a bit overkill in this case. I've also ironed out some of the designs for the corvettes and frigates of the Shin and Shenzhen factions. You'll see the differences in their design philosophy. Shin ships have radial radiators at around 2000 Kelvin, while Shenzhen ships have wide radiators at 1600 Kelvin. They also use tri-torches for their low-end ships, which means lower power and more heat compared to high torches. But despite the outdated design of tri-torches, they still have one advantage over high torches, and that is their thrust. This makes them very good for swarms of cheap ships darting around enemy fleets as the heavier ships pound the enemy from afar, which is exactly the strategy that Shenzhen employs. Shin also uses the RLS or Ring Launch System, which offers faster deployment times but exposes your missiles to the outside, whereas Shenzhen prefers missile base, which protects the missiles but they do launch slower. On the topic of missiles, they also now wait for line of sight to their target before burning, and they also ignore friendly ships. Before, it was too easy for missiles to hit their own ships during burns or maneuvers. We also now have working railguns. These in particular fire projectiles at 3 kilometers a second and produce a decent amount of heat per shot. Most weapons also now have a weapon mode, which determines what type of targets they fire at. Defense is for missiles and drones, offense is for nearby enemy ships, and target is for the current target you set for the ship. Here you'll see the railguns doing defense against incoming missiles. I had to overhaul and optimize the target assignment system and implement the sensors module, so now the railguns, PDCs, and lasers basically run mostly the same code. I never had to create hierarchies this complex in my previous games, so a lot of this was new to me. The same goes for most of the features in Heat Death, honestly, since I've never made features like these before, which does increase the time it takes for me to add something new to the game. And over here we have these guys. You'll notice they're very conical shapes, and that's because I figured out how to make cones in Unity without using 3D models. They look pretty interesting and unique, and I'm thinking about using these different designs for other factions. Of note is the design here at the end, which is a larger base for the cone, which covers the radiators from the front. Something like this would allow your ship to still use radiators safely during combat, provided of course that you keep the enemy in front of you. A more bastardized and grotesque but weirdly beautiful in its own way is this guy, which has both cones and thrusters in front and back. I was envisioning this ship as a missile defender with 8 missiles around it. Its job was basically to shoot missiles down. This is just of course another case of me messing around. Thrusters on both ends probably isn't something that will be in the final game, but we'll see. And for the demo, we basically have a change of plans. I plan to release the demo around Steam's Next Fest this October, but at the rate I'm going, it likely won't be ready at that time. So unfortunately, gamers, this baby's gonna need more time to cook in the oven. Trust me, I work on this game almost every day, and I will be releasing a free demo as soon as possible. But a realistic release date would be somewhere around November and December. Upon release, I'll gather feedback regarding features and bugs, and we'll update the demo accordingly. I'm going to be polishing the heck out of this thing for Steam's February Next Fest, and hopefully we'll gather more wishlists along the way. Wishlists usually determine whether or not a game is successful, which is why game devs practically beg for it whenever they can, especially me. As you can see on this roadmap, there's still a lot of features I gotta work on for the demo. Next week I'm going to be doing the AI for the tactical scene, and for October, I'm planning to finally add in the base game loop. Last devlog, I mentioned I'd be working on the power management as well, but as I worked on that, I realized it's not as vital for the demo as the heat management, so I decided to move its development to a later date. Speaking of which, I was wrong about something I mentioned in the last devlog. I said 1 terawatt can power the entire world for 2 months. This is wrong. This is because I am a dumbass. But now I am less of a dumbass. Now I know the difference between watts and watt hours, and I know that the world consumes about 2,000 terawatt hours of energy per month as of 2022. What I should have said is that the world's average power consumption is approximately 2.8 terawatts, which means all you need are 3 1 terawatt fusion torch drives to power the world continuously. Also, I read that some people were confused about the quote unquote stream I did last video. Yeah, that wasn't real. It was just a parody of someone and was a decent way to explain some stuff. The mean comments I made myself. And already, that's about it for today. I hope this was enlightening and I hope you're as excited as I am for the demo coming soon. If you want to learn more about heat death, check out the other devlogs on the channel. Or if you're looking for something more action-packed, check out the Shangjin incident gameplay video. Anyway, that's all from me for now. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're into that, and I'll see you soon.